Okay, so we were doing the vocabulary section of this little blue packet. Here are the questions that we just finished discussing on the front of that handout, the blue handout I just gave you. So this getting us ready to read. So before we start reading, it's always good to think about what we already know. That's why when we start a new novel, we're always like trying to figure out stuff about the setting. So vocabulary, everybody said before spring break they want to work on vocabulary, or most of you said that. So readers sometimes scan a text for specific information rather than reading every word. So when you scan a text, choose a word to look for and then run your eyes quickly over the lines. Do you guys practice this? Do you feel like you do this in your life when you're reading? If you're just looking for certain information, do you feel like you scan it and look for those words? Yeah, it's a great reading strategy. Okay, so I gave everybody in the room little sticky notes and they were trying to look for certain words, and then you were supposed to go to this paper and see if you could find the definition for your word there. I'm not sure why. There we go. So who had a way of seeing and understanding the world? What does that mean? Point of view. Yeah. So your point of view. You guys ever think about your point of view? That's maybe too much. I know I do. I probably think about mine too much too. It's really good to think about your point of view, because then when you experience something, you can say, okay, is that just because of my point of view? Yeah. And then you try and see someone else's, right? Which can be very hard. Yeah. Yep. Okay. An extremely small living thing that can spread from one animal to another and cause illnesses. Virus. So we've all heard this word probably too many times in the last year, would you say? Yeah, so it's a living thing and it jumps around from us people. Connected to the internet. Online. Yeah. Online. Normal or usual? Ordinary. Yep. Ordinary. Someone who has a lot of experience using a skill for their job. Professional. Yep. Something that is created by people. Role?
Yeah.
No.
Invention?
Invention. Yes. Invention. Invention? Mm-hmm. The part or job someone has in a family, community, or group. There's yours, Joy. The one you just told me. The part or job that someone has. The role. Yeah, what's your role? So role is a homophone. We have this kind of role, and then we have this kind of role, like to roll, right? To cause two or more things to be together. Combine. Yeah. To say something out loud for an audience. Recite, yeah. And to show respect for someone or something. Honor. Yeah. So here's a crazy one. Honor has a Canadian spelling. We put a U in there, just like the word color. O-U. Okay. Now if you look down just below, it talks a little bit about word patterns. So when we add, they're called prefixes and suffixes. So when we add little things to the beginning or the end of words, it changes their meaning. So if we look at the word, we had the word invention. What would we need to add to invention to get one who invents? Sorry?
Invented?
No. So if we look here at these endings, and we have the word invention, right?
Yeah.
So our root word is invent. Which one of these endings would we add to get a person who invents? One who invents.
Inventor?
Yes, inventor. So here we have O-R, but it's pronounced right? So if we take the word invent and we add O-R to it, we get inventor, one who invents. Yep. Related to a virus. Related to a virus. So which one, so we know our word is virus. What ending can we put on virus, we might have to take away a letter or two. Viral, yeah. When we're talking, why do you think viral is a part of this discussion if we're talking about online storytelling? What does viral have to do with online?
Well, when it goes viral, a lot of people see it.
Right, so how does that relate to virus?
A lot of people get it.
That's right, yeah. So have you guys, because I know you guys perhaps maybe spend or know more, and you know more for sure about social media than I do. Is there anything that's viral right now? Because sometimes people will talk about stuff and I have no idea what's going on, and they're like, Jamie, that's gone viral.
I feel like a lot of it's on Facebook.
Okay.
But I don't have Facebook.
Okay, so you're not a Facebook user. Do you guys know of anything that's viral at the moment, that's gone viral? No? Okay. Keep me up to date. I like to know these things. Okay. The act of combining. So we had the word combine. What would we add to make it the act of combining?
Combination.
Combination. Because shun means the act of, right? So combination. Yep. And the last one, beyond ordinary. So we had the word ordinary. What would we add to it to make it beyond ordinary? What happens when we add extra to ordinary? What word is this? Oh boy, now I can't.
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary, yeah. And some people, if you hear them with a British accent, they'll say extraordinary, right? Instead of extraordinary. Yeah. So these little things, it's just good to know sometimes what those little things mean when you add them or take them away to words. You can totally change your words. You notice how I stopped spelling extraordinary because I'm like, oh, I don't know how to spell this. So I'm up here in front of everyone. But let me try this. Extraordinary. I think I got it. Extraordinary. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we are going to read this story now about how there's this new kind of storytelling that's gone digital. Maybe you guys have seen some of these before, but you just don't know it. I'm going to show you one, and then we're going to read about one specific one. And this one's called Remaking El Rancho. So what this is, if you're interested in this and looking at more stories, we'll just look at a couple today, but this is called the Story Center. Listen deeply, tell stories. So it is a group, a nonprofit group, that helps people's stories get out there. So it's really cool. So they've approached people, and people make a little video which kind of tells their story or a piece of their story. So I chose this one. There's zillions. There's different themes, relationships, community. I chose this one called Remaking El Rancho because I thought some of you might be able to relate to it. Hopefully we'll have volume. It's always a good thing.
I didn't want to do it. Actually, the first time was a punishment. I don't remember what I had done, but I do remember my dad telling me that I had to help my mom make tortillas. I knew how from watching my mom and my grandma make them back when we lived in Mexico when I was younger. As soon as I touched the masa, I started thinking about my grandpa grinding corn at El Rancho. I remember when I was around 5 and it was a hot summer day, and school was out for 2 whole months. We would go up to my mom's hometown in El Rancho, where we would stay for about a month. It was a long bus trip from the city, but when we got to El Rancho, it was so much fun running around with my primas and primos. When we would stay at my grandma's, she would cook pozole and birria and always fresh tortillas. My grandparents' house was right across the street from the tortilleria. In the morning, I lay in bed and I could hear my grandma and other women from El Rancho waking up early, gathering their baskets, and going up to the field to pick out the corn that was ready. Then they would get back to El Rancho around 6 a.m. And my grandpa would go open the corn factory and cut the corn and grind it up and make it into masa. I hardly ever got to see my grandpa, I guess because he was always busy working. But every time I came down to El Rancho, he would wake me up and I would go with him to the corn factory and gather the corn and put it in the grinder and put the masa into plastic bags. And all this time, he would tell me stories about the corn and my antepasados, and how it would be horrible if corn was to ever disappear. But I just wondered if he was going to give me a peso or two for some candy. I never really paid attention. I was just a kid. We moved to the US when I was 7. I haven't ever gone back since. Here there's corn everywhere, but here it's the corn syrup that's in all the junk food. Or it's the packed tortillas that they sell at the supermarkets. It's not the same. But as soon as I put my hands in the masa with my stepmom, I realized what my grandpa meant back in the tortilleria, that people depended on him, and that if he didn't make the masa for tortillas, then it wouldn't just be the tortillas that would be gone, that our traditions would also be gone. This much I know. If the tortilla is good, it puffs up, and if it's not good, it doesn't. The first tortilla I ever made, there in the kitchen with my stepmom, puffed up really big, and I looked up, and she was smiling. And it wasn't a punishment anymore.
So I will tell you guys that there are, whoa, there are lots of these stories. And there's other groups. This is called Story Center. There's lots. If you typed in digital storytelling, you would get so many groups doing this. But once you start watching, it's like, oh my goodness. I'll just click, oh, this one looks interesting. I'll just click on this one. I'll just click on that one. So when I was preparing for this lesson, I seriously was getting no work done. Well, it was work. I was listening to all these stories. So if you're interested in this, it's really fascinating. Okay, so let's read. Now take out your pink page and let's read through this and learn a little bit more about this world of digital storytelling. So what we're going to do as we're reading through it, we're going to stop every now and then and question and try and figure out what it is actually that we're reading. So this is a really good strategy that we practice with a lot of your stages assignments, where you read for a little bit, but then you stop and you ask yourself a question to see if you can really understand what's happening in the reading. So we're going to do that. Okay, so let's follow along here on your pink page. Storytelling goes digital. The truth about stories is that's all we are, writes Thomas King. We are the stories we tell about ourselves and the stories others tell about us. In this way, we learn to share stories as much as we need to breathe air. Through stories we learn, we celebrate, we remember, we pass down knowledge, we heal, we honor, we grow as individuals, we connect with others, and we grow as communities. In short, we are alive through our stories. So the book doesn't have this question, but I'm going to ask you guys this question. How can stories help us? After reading that, what does the article tell us? What are some of the ways stories can help us?
We learn about each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when you listen to someone's story, you're like, wow, I didn't know that about you. Like, I didn't know you went through that, or I didn't know you experienced that. And we start to like realize how complicated we all are. We start to have more respect, right? Yeah, what else does it say stories can do for us, Susie?
We learn.
Sure. We learn. We remember. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Before there were books, radio, television, or movies, ordinary people entertained one another by telling stories. Their stories were recited, acted out, sung, or written down. Inventions like the printing press and television airwaves have now made it possible to share stories with a large number of people in faraway places. At the same time, storytelling has become the role of professionals, including authors, journalists, and filmmakers. Large companies have the power to decide whose stories will be shared widely. Some voices tend to be left out. Stories from the point of view of women, working class people, people of color, queer and trans people, and people with disabilities are not always given equal space. Okay, so I'm gonna stop and we're gonna look at this question. A cause is a reason something happens. An effect is what happens. So people invented the printing press, radio, and television. Name 3 effects of these inventions. Can you think off the top of your head what the article said? What 3 effects were from these things being invented? Or do you need to go back and kind of scan over to see what those 3 effects were? Or do you feel like you remember?
Effects is the thing that happens.
Yeah, the thing that happens because of it. So printing press, radio, and television were invented. As a result, what was the effect of that? What happened? Do you guys remember from what I just read? Or do you need to go back and kind of scan over it? You kind of remember?
I want to say that it was the people, probably, was it the people that had the power over?
Yeah. So that was the second reason. They said that professionals, stories became the role of like professionals were the ones that would tell them, right? Would tell the stories, and then they had the power to decide what was told and what was not told, right? Yeah, that was definitely one. Does anyone remember what the first one was? So let's just think. Because of press, radio, and television, now people weren't just telling stories in little circles anymore.
In songs?
In songs and stuff like that, but what happens then? So before the internet, for example, we just had television and radio. We probably didn't hear as many stories, but then the internet came and viral, right? Yeah, so these things make it possible. The effect is that more people can hear the stories far away. So stories can spread, right? That's what it says. Stories spread far and wide. Yeah, so the first effect was that stories made it possible for stories to reach people in faraway places, right? So stories spread far and wide, but it was the professionals that are now telling them through movies and stuff like that. And now we can argue that because of the internet, it's going back to the people, right, that didn't have a chance to tell their stories. But what was the third effect that happened? So these professionals tell them, and they decide which point of view is going to be told. Then what happens as a result of that? The third reason. Yeah. So certain voices are left out, right? Certain ones we don't hear. Yeah. Okay. Keeping reading underneath the little picture there. With the invention of the personal computer, a new kind of storytelling has appeared. It's called digital storytelling. A digital story is a short film made by an ordinary person rather than a professional storyteller. It combines images, sound, and text to tell a story about a part of that person's life. This form of do-it-yourself media invites us all to take back our role as storytellers. Everyone's voice matters. We all have something to say. Anyone with an online computer can make a digital story and share it with the world. This change has made it possible for people who have been silenced to speak out and be heard. Okay. So what 3 examples of professional storytellers are mentioned in the text? We kind of forgot that. I was going to ask you that question earlier. If we go back to above the picture and that paragraph right above the picture, there's 3 types of professionals that are mentioned who tell stories.
Authors.
Yep.
Journalists.
Yep.
And film.
Exactly. Now, what is a digital story? So we just watched one, and it also tells us in here, what does a digital story do? What is a digital story?
It's made by an ordinary person.
Yeah, and what does
It's
it?
a short film.
It's a short film, and what does it combine? What does it use? Pictures, text,
Sound.
and sound. Yep, for sure. So do you guys think that this is accurate based on the movies, books, and TV and video games that you see? Do you think there's certain groups of people that are left out? Yeah? Who would you say, Presley, like whose stories don't we hear? Sorry, I used your name in the video.
It's fine, I don't mind.
Okay.
I'm gonna say a lot of ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I find
Yeah.
that people want to hear like celebrities,
Ah.
those kind of people, they want to hear their stories. And
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
gossip.
It's true. Why are we are a celebrity obsessed culture, right? We want to know what the celebrities are doing. And again, maybe that's just to take us out of the real world, right? But yeah, you're right. What do you guys think? Like everyday people. Do we hear? Why don't we want to hear those stories?
I guess because the people are just the same as we are.
Yeah.
They don't, we would think that we have a story as well.
Yeah. 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 And I think like part of us might say that social media has kind of changed that now we do get to hear everybody's everyday story, but what do we tend to put on social media about ourselves? Or what do others tend to put about themselves mostly on social media? Do they put all the horrible things they're going through or all the great things they're going through?
Mostly just the good things.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you look at it and you're like, wow, I'm not doing that. Wow. And then we start to feel a little bit like, oh, shoot, my life sucks. That person's doing all this great stuff, right? So in some ways, I feel like digital media or media has given, us a chance to pretend we're someone we're not. Maybe like celebrity-like, right? I don't know. Anyway, just thoughts. Okay. So underneath there it says, this book will introduce you to many moving digital stories created by ordinary people. It will also guide you through the process of making your own digital story. It is based on the work of the Center for Digital Storytelling in Berkeley, California. This organization is one of the pioneers of digital storytelling. For over 20 years, the center has been running workshops that teach people around the world to express themselves using this art form. You can learn more about the Center for Digital Storytelling at this address, and I just showed it to you guys. Now, there is someone here who has made a digital story before. I'm not trying to look at her, but she's been part of one of these workshops. What was that like for you, Joy?
It was hard.
It was hard, yeah. What did the process involve? Tell us about it, if you want to.
It was fun. It's just that you have to tell all this story you don't want to really talk about. That was my first time sharing my story, so it was tough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you had some really difficult things that you shared in your story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it wasn't with this center, of course, this one's from California, but there's one in Winnipeg that came here, and Joy was one of the people asked if she wanted to share her story, and it ended up being really exhausting, right?
I almost didn't go the second day, because you have to free-write first your story,
Yeah.
and go through, I think she's a kind of counselor.
Yeah.
She gave me an email and asked me to go once in a while to Winnipeg so I can talk about why I did it. Because I don't really like talking about it, so
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to record it, and it was tough.
Yeah.
It's really brave of you, though.
Yeah.
I almost gave her to my mom. I'm not going. She was like, just go. I was like, I don't want to go anymore.
Yeah. It was super
And
brave
It
of
was
you.
emotional, and I cry a lot, and just sit in the circle and everyone tell their stories.
Yeah.
Listen to everyone's story was just
Exhausting.
yeah.
For sure. Presley's right though, that's super brave of you to do that. And I was privileged, Joy let me see it afterwards,
Yeah,
and
it's only you
yeah,
and one Leanna's godmother. I didn't show to anyone else.
yeah,
My
Yeah.
friend was like, can I have it? I was like, no.
yeah, yeah. So depending on, so a lot of these digital story centers, depending on if people want to share it, they can afterwards or not. Okay, we're gonna watch one more. So underneath here, Digital Story Spotlight. All the Truly Important Things is a digital story by Eric Zeng. It was created as part of the Banyan Tree Project, a campaign to end HIV stigma in Asian and Pacific Islander communities. So what does the word stigma mean? And what is HIV? It's a virus, yeah. Human immune deficiency virus, I think, something. So why, and what is stigma? You guys know what the word stigma means? You know what you can say? Yeah. Susie? No? Stigma is something that we don't like to talk about because there's a lot of shame and stuff. So why would HIV be a topic that would have a lot of stigma, that people don't want to talk about it?
Personal.
Yeah, because of how the virus is spread, right?
Yeah.
It's a sexually transmitted disease, so people often don't like to talk about that. I've talked openly about my good friend from Zambia who passed away, and lots of friends I had in Africa who passed away, and I do know some people in Canada as well. It's not just in one part of the world, this virus, it's everywhere. It used to be a lot more deadly. Now they have a lot of drugs that can help people through HIV, yeah. So HIV is a virus that makes it hard for your body to fight other infections. There's a lot of stigma or negative and unfair beliefs around HIV. This stigma makes it harder to live with and fight against this illness. Many people are afraid to talk about HIV, get tested for it, or even get treated for the disease. As a result, HIV continues to spread. The Banyan Tree Project organized a digital storytelling project to help Asian and Pacific Islanders living with HIV share how they've been affected by this disease. These digital stories break the silence around HIV, and in doing so, they are helping fight shame and judgment. So we're going to watch it now, and as you watch, think about these questions. How do you think the process of making a digital story may have helped Eric? How might Eric's digital story help others living with HIV? And how might Eric's digital story help people who do not have HIV? So we're going to watch it, and you can think about Eric as he's sharing his story. I think you'll be surprised by some of the things he says.
Your HIV test came back positive. 2 months ago, I graduated from medical school. I came to San Francisco to start my residency, and I thought that here, in one of the pastel-colored Victorians that line the city's foggy streets, I'd finally find love. Crumbled. In the space of a moment, all my pastel-colored hopes caved in. Lost. Everything lost. I had crumbled on the floor. A pair of arms helped me stand up. It was my doctor. He held me in a tight hug and he whispered fiercely in my ear, "All the truly important things in life you haven't lost. If it's your career, you can still have that. And if it's love you're looking for, you can still find that." I heard his words, but I couldn't believe him. 3 years had passed. By that time, I'd finished my residency and had just started a fellowship to train as an HIV physician. One day, my mentor asked me, "Is it triggering for you, being HIV positive, to work so closely with other HIV positive patients?" I thought quietly for a long moment. Sometimes, if it feels right, I would tell my patients that I also shared this, the virus. Why? Oh, I suppose that I wanted them to know that if I can make it, they can too. No, I replied. No, Dana, actually, it's deeply joyful. Maybe because what we have to offer is something that's fundamentally hopeful. And as I spoke, it dawned on me that those fiercely whispered words from long ago